Today's video, my mom reacts to Zach the Films. Here, take this.
Zach the Films. Should I just start?
Should I take my
Stop.
pen out?
No. Should I just start up here?
It's too late.
Okay. Should I start up here?
No. Start.
Wait, I wanna. Oh yeah. Okay. Wait a minute. Such a tiny space. Let's start here.
If you try to swallow a huge piece of food, your body will attempt to force it out by coughing. But if it's too big, it causes a total blockage in your throat, and no air can get through. Without oxygen, you can lose consciousness within minutes. But if you swallow something like a pen cap, the opening will allow for some air to pass through. It'll still be difficult to breathe, so have someone perform the Heimlich maneuver until the force pushes out the object.
Ooh.
If you try to swallow they set up a baby monitor to keep an eye on their daughter. Because recently, they had noticed open doors and crooked window blinds, things that made them uneasy.
Not interested.
He would hold the fuel in his mouth and spit it into a flame, causing a massive fireball. But this time, he accidentally swallowed some of the liquid. As he brought the flame to his lips, he burped, and the fire ignited the vapors, traveling down his throat and into his stomach. This triggered a huge explosion. The crowd erupted in applause, thinking it was part of the act.
Yay!
They soon realized he had been
hit with his legs and skin and stuff.
His body parts rained down, and his head was later found in the popcorn machine.
No way!
He would hold the fuel in his mouth and spit.
Wait, what?
When you stub your toe,
I know why it's painful, because it hurts.
He illegally entered the cockpit of an empty plane and took to the skies. He was a baggage handler for the airline and had no formal pilot
stole
training.
a plane without a license.
Controllers were told
you have to have a license to steal a plane.
Yeah.
For over an hour, he performed daring stunts.
Done pretty good for not knowing how to. Well, maybe not.
While air traffic
how does he know how to do all that?
pleaded with him to land safely.
Please, sir.
Eventually, he crashed the plane on a remote island to avoid hurting any innocent people.
Well, that was nice of him.
He illegally entered the cockpit of the dog was placed in a sack attached to the side of a car, and it would just hang above the road with its head sticking out. The
I don't think
of the
that's
sack
nice.
was
That's
clamped
going
to
to be
the
dangerous.
step along the side of the car, and the top was
sack?
hooked to an open window.
Whoa.
Usually meant the dog was toast.
I'm sorry, what?
I have to do my.
The dog was placed in a sack
so
attached to the side of the car, and it would just hang above the road with its head sticking out. The bottom of the sack was clamped to the step along the side of the car, and the top was hooked to an open window. But car accidents usually meant the dog was toast.
Cool. Great.
As he reached for his money, a note slipped through claiming that someone was trapped inside. News outlets ran with the story, reporting that a man was somehow stuck in the ATM. The story spread like wildfire, with many speculating if it was even possible for someone to fit in such a tiny space. When police arrived, they did find the man, but he was actually trapped in a maintenance room behind the ATM, not in the machine itself. He went in to repair it when the door got stuck behind him, and with no phone to call for help, he wrote notes and slipped them through the receipt slot. As he reached for his money, they implanted a microphone in its ear, a transmitter in its skull, and a wire in its fur. Then they spent years training the cat to listen to human conversations. The sound would be transmitted through the wire and picked up by spies waiting nearby.
Oh, that's
When it was finally ready for its mission, they released it near a Soviet embassy.
And they used cats to do it? Yeah, like a cat's not going to do what you want it to do.
By a taxi, putting an end to the $20 million he slipped in the snow.
Great feelings
$20 million.
But even though he screamed for help, no one was around to hear him.
Wait, what happened to his neck?
He slipped in the snow and broke his neck. But even though he screamed for help, no one was around to hear him. He laid in freezing conditions, wearing only his pajamas. But his dog heard his cries and laid on top of him to keep him warm. She licked his face to keep him awake and barked for help. And she did this for almost 24 hours straight. A neighbor finally heard and found the man, barely alive, and he ended up surviving thanks to his dog's devotion.
Yeah, but he's
He
paraplegic.
slipped and steel spikes shoot out from the front of the police car's
Oh, I
bumper
didn't know that's how
once
they
it
did it.
reaches a fleeing vehicle. This pole goes
No
under the
way.
vehicle, and it drives into the spikes. Instantly, they puncture the rubber and create small controlled holes. These slowly deflate it instead
Mobile
of
spike.
causing a dangerous
Is that what they're called?
blowout. And within
Mobile.
Oh, I
seconds,
see that,
the
okay.
fleeing car loses control, forcing the suspect to stop. Steel spike, the baby drops down the sewer pipe,
What?
getting stuck in the tight space. And rescuers spent 2 hours carefully cutting him out. When they did, they realized that the afterbirth was still attached.
I'm sorry,
meaning
what?
He had only just been born. At first, they thought he was abandoned, and soon found bloody tissues in a woman's apartment. But she explained she was on the toilet when she suddenly gave birth, and the baby just fell
That's
down
not
the pipe.
how
The
toilets
baby
work.
dropped down the sewer pipe.
toilet.
The vat was filled with a strange greasy substance, along
see
with
bones.
human bones
Yeah.
and a gold ring. Now, the owner told the police that his wife had run away. The vat was
I
filled
see
with a
bones.
strange greasy substance, along with
funny.
human bones and a gold ring. Now, the owner told the police that his wife had run away.
The way you
When they
said
searched the
Oy.
basement of his sausage factory,
Oh.
they discovered that he had boiled her body in
Oh, he just
caustic
boiled her in
chemicals
caustic chemicals and then
dissolved
put her in the
nearly all of her
sausage
remains.
vat.
People believed that he had been planning to turn the rest of her into sausage. He was
Look at-
immediately taken to court where he was sentenced to life in prison. The vat would use a needle to gently trace along the edges, weakening
Of
the
what?
outline.
What
If you
is
get a
that?
simple shape, you can snap the outside off to save time.
What
But
is
with
that?
complex shapes,
Squid Game.
it's safer to lick
What
the
is
back
he
of the
cutting?
candy,
it's a
leaving
cookie.
a thick layer.
Basically, I forget what it's called, but basically you have to. There's basically a shape on it on the
Okay.
cookie. Then you have to use a needle to cut the shape, but it has to be cut out perfectly. If there's any cracks, then it will fail.
As they
You wanna see
use a
again?
needle to gently
What happens
trace
if you fail?
along the edges,
Then you get
weakening
it.
the outline.
Squid Game.
If you get a simple shape,
Like what?
you can
Like
snap
they
the
did this for
outside
real?
off
No,
to
they
save
didn't do it for
time.
real.
But with complex shapes, it's safer to lick the back of the candy, leaving a thick layer of spit. You see,
Why?
your saliva softens the sugar and dissolves the edges,
Oh, I
making
see
it
what you mean.
easier to carve. And you can also use a lighter to heat the needle. and
Ah,
melt
just
the
like I was
candy
telling you about
faster.
earlier. To
Use a needle
the blood
to
out of a
gently
toenail.
trace. As they pierced her ear, the gun caused
Ugh.
micro cracks in the cartilage, which allowed bacteria to survive. 3 weeks later, her ear
Oh,
was
yummy.
swollen, red, and leaking pus.
My gosh.
Doctors found that a bacterial infection had eaten away part of her cartilage. She became resistant to antibiotics, forcing surgeons to drain the
bacteria
wound
became
and
resistant to
perform
antibiotics.
reconstructive surgery.
She wasn't
Experts warn piercing
resistant
guns are
to all
often
antibiotics.
unsanitary, and hollow needles are much safer. As they pierced her ear, the gun caused micro when a firing squad shoots a prisoner. One
Oh.
of the bullets actually isn't real. You see, one of the rifles is loaded with a blank,
And they don't
but
know
it
which
still
one,
fires
so they
and
don't have
kicks
to feel
back
like they
when
did
the
it.
trigger is pulled. The soldiers aren't told which rifle it is, casting doubt on who actually shot and killed the man.
I'd
This
still
way,
feel
the
like a piece
soldiers
of
can
crap.
feel less guilty and sleep at night,
Yeah.
knowing there was a chance that
Good job,
they
guys.
weren't.
You
He
might not
tried
have been
to
the one
light
that
his shoe
executed
on
him.
fire mid-flight, but the
Why?
attendants smelled the burning matches and saw what he was doing. Passengers and crew wrestled him to the ground.
hate his
and
shoes?
eventually, he was sedated. And
They
when
put
they
him in his
checked
leg?
his shoes, they
They injected him
discovered
in
a
his leg?
fuse sticking out of each one. It turned out they were stuffed with enough explosives to bring down the entire plane.
was a
And that's
kamikaze.
why you have to take off your shoes at the airport. He
I-
tried to let
okay.
sick people ride this roller coaster that will climb over
and then it kills you.
1,500 feet. Next, it
called the
plummets at
euthanasia
over
coaster. I've heard
200
about
miles
this.
an hour before
It's a-
going
I don't
through
think it's real
7
yet, though,
shrinking
right?
loops.
It
and
is.
this
It
creates
is real.
enough force to make
It's
the
a
riders
concept right
black
now.
out
It's
immediately. It cuts
real,
off
but
the
no one's
oxygen to their
used it yet,
brains,
I don't
and
think.
after 60
they still
seconds,
made
this
them?
will
Yeah.
kill them. Now, this
Because
ride was
euthanasia's legal in
designed
some
for
countries.
terminally ill patients, giving them
That
the
is not
option
how-
of
that would not be a
fun
good way to
death.
go. No.
But only a scale model was ever built.
No, see, it's a concept.
Sick people
I thought they
ride
actually
this
built it, but
roller
it's just a
coaster
concept.
that will climb over
There's another
15
concept where there's just a there's just a roller coaster. It goes up, then it goes down, then it just drops into lava.
100 feet. Next, it plummets
I
at
think
over
so.
200
I don't
miles
I
an
don't
hour
actually think so,
before going
but I'm
through 7 shrinking
I'm
loops.
1% sure.
And this creates enough
I think
force
this
to
would be a
make the riders
terrible
black
way
out
to
immediately.
go.
It cuts off the oxygen to their brains. He
Ugh.
milked the venom from the snake.
Yeah, I know.
If you pulled out someone's spine,
Oh.
could you use it like a whip? Well,
Sure,
human
I mean, if
spines
you
are
pulled out
made
their
of
spine, you
many
could do
small
anything, right?
bones, making them flexible. And when swung hard, these bones can hit with enough force to cut into your skin. Now, sharpening the bones would make it act like a serrated blade, slicing even more into flesh. And if you
They
Spinal
bleeped that out.
it could be
It's the
turned into a
Spinal
deadly
Tap.
flail,
All the things they
smashing
show and they
anything in
bleep
its
that
way.
out.
It's the Spinal Tap
It
from
is.
Terraria.
It
They
is.
smashed her head into the cake.
Yeah, I do.
but
I've had
didn't
it. I've had
realize
that
there
Oh,
were
yeah,
weapon.
I've
wooden
got them
sticks
that one
inside
time.
holding it together,
Miserable
and
things.
one pierced her eyelid, getting stuck in her eye socket. Blood poured from the
a
wound
candle?
as she screamed in pain. She was rushed to the hospital where the stick was carefully removed. But if it had been just an inch to the
Well,
right,
doctors always
she
say
would
that.
have gone blind.
Well, I saved
They
you, but if it
smashed
had been
her- if
half
you
an
get
inch to the
trapped
left, you'd have
underwater,
died.
Your body will eventually use the last of the oxygen in your blood. But after about a minute, your chest tightens, and the gasp reflex forces you to inhale. Water rushes into your lungs, choking you instantly. Your body thrashes, trying to reach the surface, but within seconds, your brain starts shutting down. Then your body stops fighting, and you'll feel at peace as you black out.
Oh.
And after just a few
And
minutes
how do they know
without
that?
air,
Someone told
your
them?
brain suffers severe damage until you eventually dissolve into the deep. Your
Oh, that's
body
beautiful.
weightless
Thank
in
you.
the abyss. The tank flew across the room, striking the boy in the
Jeez.
head. You see, he was undergoing an MRI scan after
Oh,
a
they
surgery.
put the oxygen
But during
tank
the
in there.
procedure, a staff member accidentally
Magnetic.
brought a metal oxygen tank into the room. And when the machine was turned on, its massive magnet pulled the tank into the chamber where the boy was
The
laying.
machine was always
And
on.
despite medical attention, he passed away 2 days later.
Ew.
The tank flew across. If you lit a cigarette on a spaceship, it would form a round blue flame, and it would just hover in place, feeding off whatever air was around it. If there was enough oxygen, the flame could suddenly flare up, spreading out in every direction. It would move in a slow, creeping sphere, sticking to surfaces and igniting them. Eventually, the fire could latch onto walls and air ducts.
So the moral
and
of
in
the
an
story is
enclosed
don't smoke a
spacecraft,
cigarette
it could become
on your
deadly in
spaceship.
seconds. If you lit a cigarette, she slammed into him, and he flew through her windshield.
And then
But
she
was
just
drunk,
drove around with
and
him in
instead
there.
of calling for help, she drove
watched this
home
on
with
Ray.
him still
What's his name?
stuck in the
Ray
glass.
Yeah.
Once she was in her garage,
Yep.
she apologized, only to leave him there for 2 more
Woke up
days
the next
as he
day,
bled
2 days
out.
later, I guess,
When he
and found
finally
him and was like,
died,
uh-oh.
she and her friends stuffed his corpse into a car trunk and dumped it in the park. But after she bragged about it at a party, police
Smart. She's
discovered
so smart.
her crime. She slammed into him.
One more.
If you tilt your bow as you shoot, the arrow will bend slightly once released. And if you do this at just the right angle, it pushes the arrow off course. As it moves through the air, the bend keeps pulling it to the side, and it will actually curve around the target instead of hitting it. Then, as the bend evens out, the arrow's path becomes straight, allowing you to shoot around objects. If you he was fixing the pin setter when it suddenly activated.
Oh, no.
The machine moved down as
No.
if to set up the bowling pins, but the man was still underneath. And
gosh.
the weight of it crushed him
Oh, my
instantly.
gosh.
With no one around to hear his cries, he was left to suffer from his injuries.
Oh, that's-
and his body
wow.
was found the next morning, still stuck in the bowling lane.
That's
He was
a good way to
fixing
end
the
the
pin
night, right?
setter when
Leave with
You
good
don't-
images
you
in your
don't-
head.
You don't want to do more?
No, I think I think we gotta quit while we're ahead. And end with a bang. Or a crush.